everyone, and excited to be able to get into this fun free art class with Lara Saldana from HeartSpark Homeschool. She is teaching teens how to be able to turn their creative skills and talent into real life illustrating skills. Today we are going to be going over how to be able to draw a watercolor green jay in Procreate. If you don't already have that app, I highly recommend that you get it. Lara, tell them a little bit about why you recommend Procreate. We can hear you now. Okay, Amy, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Okay, thank you guys for joining us. I want to make sure that you have the download. She's giving away a Procreate cheat sheet. Is for the bird that we are illustrating today, and a chance to be able to win a month's worth of illustration coaching. So I'm going to go ahead and share the link to be able to see that. Everyone has a link to that and is able to get that. So if you guys haven't already signed up for that, I would highly recommend that you go and do that. And then you print out that outline. If you're going to be joining us on paper rather than in Procreate, that also has a printable version that you can print on your printer. So Lara, tell us.
If they weren't able to hear the Procreate spiel I just gave, should I do it again?
Yeah, I was just going to say, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you recommend people using Procreate.
Okay, well, I am a mostly self-taught illustrator. I did not go to school for this, and I started my first illustration job applying to Gather Homeschool, and they needed Procreate. They needed you to be able to do a watercolor style on Procreate, which I had never used before, and I had zero interest in using digital art programs before this. And when I got it, I fell in love with it because Procreate is very affordable. It's got a lot of capabilities. You can do a whole lot with it, and it's very easy to access. Most families have an iPad, and so for $1, this program that can allow you to do professional work and make real money, do a real job, just with this program. So it's really, really incredible. And the brush behave like the real thing. So a watercolor brush behaves like a watercolor brush, like real watercolor in physical paints. And so I really love that. So since then, I've worked for 4 homeschool companies and illustrated several children's books. So now I am sharing how to do that for anybody who is interested.
So you're a homeschool graduate yourself, and so you're helping other homeschoolers to be able to develop their illustration skills so that they can have jobs in the real world and take their creative talent and make it into an actual career.
Yes, and many, many, many people have no idea how many opportunities there are for artistic loving kids. And I'm also in another cool. Yes, I.
Okay, so are you guys ready to get started on the illustration? I know that I'm ready. I actually have a version of this on my watercolor paper, and I have my watercolors set up. So if you guys need a minute to get those set up or to open up that Procreate app.
And if you are using it on paper with with your brushes, you need your printable, and then also your brushes. Many people don't know this, but if they have a flat edge, here, if they have a flat edge, then that's more for a thicker paint. And if they have a round shape, that's usually more for watercolor because it kind of holds the water. So that's a little fun tip for you. And if you are doing it on Procreate, make sure you get the file that says it's for Procreate, because we want to be able to paint under that line layer. And if you get the picture with the white back, it won't work like that.
Okay, Amy says that her daughter Ellie is ready and they're going to follow along. Okay, let's get started.
Yay. All right. So on my screen, you can see that I have my reference picture that I got here from this photographer. You can see I have my lines that are going to be on top above my painting layer. If you do not know how to make layers, just click this little plus button and you can grab that layer and you can move it around where you need it. Think about the layers kind of like an icing on the cake, like cake layers. So this is going to be like the frosting, the part that's going to be on the top. And these are going to be the layers below, and this will be the cake board, basically. So that's kind of how you think about it. This it is, the more upfront it's going to be. So I'm going to click one of these layers below my lines. Here's my lines, and click on one that's below. And if you ever take a class with me in the future, I'm going to share with you better watercolor brushes. But for today, I just wanted you guys to already comes with the program. So if you go to this little paintbrush button here and you go down the list, my list is much bigger than yours is, but my list, just go down to painting right here where it says painting and find the Tamar, ignore that, Tamar. So find that Tamar brush. And even though it's not technically a watercolor brush, it actually acts more like the good watercolor brushes. So we're going to use that for our bird here today. And if you are working with physical paints, watercolor techniques is to think. It's kind of like chess. You got to sort of think ahead. Uh-oh, hang on. Go away. All right. So if you think ahead, you can see it real quick. Think about what we're going to do that color first, or avoid those sections with your paint. And we're going to kind of do the same sort of thing with Procreate. But right here, this part and this part are our lightest sections on the bird. So we're going to make sure that we don't add too much color on, because watercolor paints or other paints, you don't really go over the watercolor with white or light colors. It doesn't work that way. So I'm going to go back to my Tamar brush that I got right here in painting. And see up here in this little color spot up here, this is where you're going to select your colors. Your colors may very well look a lot brighter, and that's okay. That's something that I changed later just so that it prints more correctly when I'm working on professional illustration. So it's okay if yours looks a little bit brighter, but just go and find a bluish, or you can just click and select and hold, and it'll grab the color. So you can see how it's moving around on the picture. It's going to grab that color for you. So you can also kind of do that to do a little cheat. So one of the techniques with watercolor brushes in Procreate to make it look like a watercolor brush is when you click it, you see how when I hold it down hard, it doesn't look very watercolor. But if you do it lightly, and you can kind of like go lightly around the edges, it's going to act a lot more watery. So we're going to do for this whole bird, we're going to lightly just sort of shade into an area where that bluish color is. Over here on the left, this top bar is what's going to change the size. So I'm going to bring the size down some, and I'm going to use this same blue kind of wherever I'm seeing him. So I see some his leg on his thigh and some up here up on his shoulder. Now I am going to select a little bit more of a greeny color. And instead of painting on that same layer, I'm going to make another one on top of it. And the reason is, Amelia, can you are you able to mute yours, because I'm hearing a whole lot of wind? Sorry.
Yes, so sorry.
I feel like.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so the reason why we do that is because when you do it on the same layer, it makes a very burned look to it. We call it burned, where it's kind of too harsh and too hard looking. Can you still hear me? No? Yes? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, good. All right. So when you're painting on the same layer with a watercolor style, because even though you have a watercolor brush, there's different techniques to make something look like an actual watercolor, right? So instead of going on the same layer, we're going to go on a layer above with this green, and we're going to lightly kind of go over those spots that we had with the blue and come down also. And then with your smudge brush, you can also grab that painting, go down to paint and grab Tamar, which each of these brushes up, each of these buttons up here, these tools, all you have access to the same brushes for all of them. So for smudge, we're gonna use Tamar too. And we're going to just barely smudge the edges. And so now they look like they're kind of blended together. We've got a blue and we've got a green, and they kind of look like they're blended together. And now when I'm happy with that, then I can merge them together by just pinch and swiping. So then we keep doing that. And this is something we don't have to do for other kinds of styles, like oil paint or color pencil. You don't have to keep doing all these layers and merging necessarily, but for watercolor, this is the best way I've found to do it. So now I'm going to get a little bit of a brighter green, and I'm going to go over and do the same thing. I'm lightly, because your pencil, if you have the Apple Pencil, it's pressure sensitive. And so you want to do it lightly. And then we're going to go in, because we don't want a hard edge. We're going to just kind of tap or just barely smudge on those edges so that they spread and look a little bit more blended together. And then again, we're going to merge them together, make another layer on top. And I see a lot of, oops. I see, why is it? Oh, there we go. I see right here on his wing, there's a kind of a yellowy green. So I'm going to grab that yellowy green, make it a little bit brighter because I want it to stand out. And I'm on that layer above that color layer. And I'm going to go over some of that area that we've already painted, and I'm going to come down too. Because he's got these birds are really cool. Most places in the country have some form of blue jay or scrub jay or something like that. But I don't know why that keeps popping up. But the green jays are pretty different. And even though they act a lot like blue jays, they're so colorful and so pretty. I love them because they're so unique to this area where I'm living, which is South Texas. So I've gone through and put that yellowy green in all of those spots. I think I'm going to add a little tiny bit up here more. And then I'm going to go in and use my little smudge and just do the edges, just so it looks a little bit more flowy and watercolory. Merge them together, make a new layer. And now I want to lean into those blues a little bit more. So I'm going to go down to the blues. And if you ever do a class with me, it will not be this rushed. I'm sorry, I'm having to kind of go a little bit fast so that we can actually cover it all. But I'm going to use this really pretty blue and just kind of go over these spots. I'm seeing some right here, and I'm seeing some on here and right here. So I'm going to be hitting those areas. If you do not know already, make sure that when you're doing an undo, you can use 2 fingers to tap and it'll undo for you. It's so handy, and it becomes so habit forming that sometimes I do it when I'm drawing on paper, forgetting for a second that it doesn't work like that on paper. And again, we're just going to smudge the edges. And something you need to know is don't be afraid of letting your art or on paper take a good while to do, because a lot of times the things that really look the best are the ones that you had to go through and do layers and layers and layers and layers to make it look as beautiful and visual interesting to your eye. Because if I just did one flat color of blue, it would not look as interesting as what we're doing, where we're doing layers of different kinds of blues and different spots. It makes your eye go all over it, and it's just more appealing to whoever is looking at it. So don't be afraid, and that it might take a while. When I first started, I wanted to do everything really fast, and Turns out that a lot of my illustrations will take hours and hours and hours to do. But when you're done with it, you feel so much better about it because it looks so much cooler than it would have had you stopped at like 30 minutes. So I'm not quite happy with, I'm sorry that thing keeps popping up. My cord is not connected very well. I'm going to get a darker blue and kind of go around the edge of these feathers. You see how there's kind of a deeper, almost a regular blue jay blue that goes around the edges of the feathers. And right now that looks too blocky. It looks too hard edge. So again, we're just going to smooth just a little bit on the sides to make it really pretty. And this is not the brush that I normally use for when I'm working, because I have some that work a lot nicer for a watercolor look, but this one really does work pretty good. And if you get into a certain style, there's so many brush packs out there that help you even more than the ones that come with the program, even though the program comes with quite a lot. So even if you're getting into comic book styles or colored pencils or something like that, there's tons of brush packs out there. So I am going to leave these feathers mostly how they are right now, because I want to move on to his head with that black and blue kind of area. So we're going to grab a new blue and we're going to go into all the areas. It's interesting because his beak here, even though beaks are usually like black or orange or yellow, his is kind of blue on the top, which is kind of cool looking. So we're going to get that here and into this little marking area here. And we're going to do just the top of his head too. And I'm just going to smudge a teeny tiny bit here. So right now it's just one flat blue. So I'm going to grab another shade. And if you just move it a little bit and come in a little bit, a couple of spots here and there, it's going to still add to the dimension of your painting. And when you're working with physical watercolor, it's always good to have a swatch paper where you are testing to see, because if you use more water, it's going to look one way, and you use less water, it's going to look another way. So it's very good to have that swatch paper to help you out. Oh, I missed his little eyebrow dot that he's got there. He's got a little eyebrow light spot right here. Okay, now he's starting to look pretty colorful already. I'm going to go ahead and merge these layers that I've got so far, and make sure you're not merging your line art on there. Line art needs to stay separate, because you will not be able to undo that if you go way down the line. You can, if you accidentally do it, just hit undo with your 2 fingers, tap. But if you forget and way later, then you won't be able to separate that, and you won't be able to blend it right and things like that. So make sure your line art is always separate. Let's go back to our color layer, make a new layer on top. And now let's put that black in. Now for it to look like a real watercolor, most watercolor paints do not get super dark black. Like in this picture, this bird is super dark black there. And your watercolor kits, even if they have a black section, when you actually paint with it, it's usually not super black. So to make this more realistic, we're going to take a blue. So we're going to take a blue, but we're going to go to about here. So it's like a dark, almost a grayish blue. And we're going to start painting in this area that's black. I'm going to go ahead and go over his eye. For now, we're going to tweak that a little bit more in a bit. And we're just going to kind of give him a layer. It's okay if you go over the line some, because we can always go back over that and erase the spots we went over, and that's fine. Now, we're going to go and make another layer on top, and we're going to give more definition to some spots with that same color that we've got. So now it looks darker. And for his eyeball, you can see right here, he's got like a little shine area that's still kind of bluish. So I don't want to go over that section. I'm going to leave that. Oops. How did I grab the wrong color? Give me a second. There we go. I'm going to paint leaving that area out. There's a name for that, but I forget what it is. And we're just going to add some different blacks, different gray blacks in there to give him a little bit more definition. And now, remember how I told you we started with that lighter color? We're kind of moving our way darker and darker and darker. So again, I'm going to make another layer, and I can eventually get down to a real black, 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 and go and just use it in just a couple of spots, and it's going to really make him pop. See how I'm just using it on the bottom round part of his eye, just a little bit around his nose, and just kind of using it almost like a shadow, where we're just using it in certain spots to give him that definition in that area. And then we can always go back in and use our smudge on the edges so that it blends that a little bit more and makes it look a little bit more fluid. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty good for his head. Now let's keep working on his body a little bit more. I'm going to leave that black area separate because I may go back in and clean it up. See how I'm kind of going over the line some in that black area? I might go back in and clean that up a little bit in a bit, but I'm going to go back to the colorful area, make a new layer between, and let's go back to getting some of those greenish looking blue colors and fill in more on his feathers back here. So we're going to go down and fill in some of these feathers. I'm going to go down here to the tail, because you start off almost just filling in bigger areas. And then as you go on and you add more layers and more layers, you're kind of just adding little lines and details in certain places to make it look like those details are popping out a little bit more. Now I'm going to add a new layer again, and I'm going to go back to that kind of yellowy green, lime green. That's probably a good name for it. And I'm going to pop some more of that in there in a couple of spots. Up here on his feathers, his wing feathers, maybe a little bit up here. And it's okay if it looks a little bit blocky because we can go back in and use our smudge. When I just tap that, I'm just tapping it here with the smudge brush, but it scatters it enough that it looks like that sort of mottled green that he's got. And then let's go back to the blue. One trick that I learned along the way is once you've kind of got the main colors in, you lean into the shadows, lean into the light, lean into the shadows, lean into the light. And this works for Procreate. If you're working with with physical paints, this is not going to be as accurate because you've got to make sure you're not painting over your light section, right? With physical paints. But in Procreate, I'm going to like start getting darker in some spots and really kind of make those shadows pop out. See how I'm kind of going under the wings, and I'm going around some of these tail feathers to make that pop out. And then what I mean by leaning into the shadows, leaning into light, now I'm going to go the other direction, and I'm going to grab a very light, almost white color and kind of lean into those spots that are kind of a little bit more highlighted, like this top part of the wing and his shoulder up here. And so you're kind of going back and forth and pushing the extremes, because it's easy to look at your painting and be really happy with it. And then once you add shadows, it just pops out and you're like, oh, wow, that looks so much better, even though I thought it looked amazing before. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to be able to see just how amazing it can look until you start adding those extra realism factors there. So now we've, for the most part, gotten our colorful bird part. And since we don't have a ton of time, I don't want to spend more time on that part yet. So I'm going to merge all of those colored spots. His foot here is kind of a grayish color. So I'm going to swing over here to the grays, a little bit light gray first. and just fill in this top spots and then bring that down to a darker gray. And just kind of get that bottom section of his little foot. Okay. Now, I'm not going to do a ton on the branch that he's sitting on, but I do want to give it something. So let's go grab a brown. But you'll see when you look at the browns, and this is one of the important things about art, it's trying to use your eye to dissect the different colors. So it's not just brown. I see, grab a different pen so you can see it. I see kind of an orangey color here. I see almost a blue color here, grays and blacks, sort of a yellow spot here, peachy kind of white colors there. So that's what you need to start training your eye to see. This bird is not just green. He's got blue, he's got white, he's got yellow green, he's got a darker blue here, he's got almost a royal blue there, he's got a bright teal here, he's got a darker blue here. So it's when you can kind of get your eye to see all the different colors that make up the color is what really helps you become a better artist and making your paintings just really pop and be visually interesting. So I'm going to grab kind of this, maybe this peachy color, because that's probably the lightest color on our branch. And most of those colors you can see are kind of on the tops of things, because that's where the light is probably hitting it the most. So I'm just going to go through. All right, I'm not coloring this way because that's not the way the wood goes. It's going horizontally. So I'm going to make my colors go horizontally too. So if you're working with physical watercolor, make sure you're leaving those areas of lightness as light as you can. It's always, you can always go back and darken them up later, but on physical paint, you can't necessarily lighten them. So I'm going to go through and get some beautiful browns in here. And then I'm going to change this brown to a little bit of a different kind of brown. And again, get a new layer so that I can blend it and smudge it later. And we're going to just kind of go in. And even if I'm not perfectly following the reference picture, it's a reference picture is there to get ideas. It's not necessarily that you copy it perfectly. Sometimes you do for practice, but or for if you're doing a portrait, but a lot of times it's just to kind of get you started and get your artistic brain juices going. Okay, now I'll do it again. I'm going to add in some blue, which seems kind of weird for a branch, but I see some shades of that. So I'm going to add some of that in there. And see, that doesn't look weird, does it? It doesn't make the branch look blue. It just makes it look like it's got shade. So I'm just going to add this in some spots. And I'm going to use my smudge to just kind of like blend that a little bit because it looked a little bit harsh. And I even see almost a little bit of a greenish gray in there right here. So I'm going to use some of that. And it's okay if the colors look kind of funky because we can go back over them with another brown to make them look more, make the brown pop out more. And that's actually a technique that a lot of people use with physical watercolors is they will start off with kind of the shadowy areas. So if you're painting like a banana, you might start with like this dark purple or dark blue, which is not banana colored at all. But when you go back over it with the yellow, it makes that look like shadow. It makes it look like bring that shaded area out. And it's actually pretty cool the way that works. I need to blend that a little bit more. So now I'm going to lean a little bit more into those warmer colors, get some of those yellows. Amelia, how are we on time? I can't really see it.
We're doing fine. We can finish up working on this, and then we can talk to people up and ask them to share their painting. I'm excited to see everyone's finished painting. So if you guys can share it in the comments once you're done with yours, I would love to see it. And I know Laura would too.
I would love to see it. Yes, I would. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit scribbly. We can just kind of tap, smudge it, and it's going to look not smudgy, not scribbly. But look how many different layers we've got there. Think about like a rock, how cool the different, like a rock's not just a gray flat rock, you know? It's got all these different minerals in it that make different colors pop out. And it just makes your eye really want to stop and look at whatever it is. And that's what I try to do with my paintings too, so that it's not something that you just look at for 2 seconds. You're like, oh, yep, I'm done. I'm bored of that. I want it to be something that you want to stop and look at a little bit longer. And just kind of observe all the different shades and colors that are all in there. And see, like right now, like how I added that darker color, it looked pretty good before, but like when I just added that in there, it just makes it pop out as more realistic looking. Now that it's got that darker color in there, it looks more realistic. I don't have another word for it. I'm grabbing more of a yellowy color now and just kind of going over in some more sections that look a little bit too blue or too orange. And I think I might go over my bird one more time with another blue, maybe more of a tealish, deep teal kind of color to make some of the wings sort of pop out a little bit more. Some of the wing feathers, I mean. Maybe put a little bit more shadow here. And a little bit down here. And then the last thing I think I'm going to do is get this kind of light blue I see right here to kind of outline the, what do they call the feather spine? It's not the quick, is it?
The quill?
I forget. Is it the quill? It might be the quill. And I just want to bring that color out a little bit here because it's going to make that's actually not light enough. I need something lighter. It's going to make it kind of stand out more as almost like a shine. So see how that just made it kind of pop out a little bit more. And I'm going to do that in a couple of spots to make the feathers sort of pop out a little bit more too. Okay, and then the last thing for my bird today is I'm going to kind of is that I went over. It's okay if you leave some out because that's actually very real for watercolor is when you paint watercolor and then you go over it with a pen, which is basically the look we're going for. Sometimes there's some that's kind of sticking out, but I don't necessarily want it sticking out this much. So I'm going to go over and clean up the edges a little bit, mainly in the black area because that's the part that looks the messiest. And I think that's probably where I'm going to leave him. We could definitely keep going and we could make more textures and more details. And the further you go, the more detailed he's going to look. And the same thing with the branch. But I think this is a pretty good green jay for a 30-minute class. So thank you so much for doing it with me.
Laura. So tell us a little bit about the illustration classes that you are going to be holding this fall.
Okay, well, I am going to have 3 different kinds of classes, and I'm going to start them in August. The first one is a basics Procreate class, which you may or may not need. This is for those that haven't really used it or are a little bit insecure about tech stuff. that you want somebody to just go in and show you all the basic tools. So that would be the first class, which if you have played around with it, if you've done this class with me on, oh, thank you, Janet. If you've just done this class with me on Procreate, you probably don't need that one. The next two classes, you get to pick. You can do one or both, and they are going to be more your specialized field, whether it's something like this, where it's a like more beautiful watercolor realistic type look, or if it's going to be a character design. And if it's the character design, I'm actually going to have one of the people on my team be teaching it. He is really, really good. He's illustrated over 20 books. And it just each week we will have a prompt for each class. And so like this was the green jay. So for the watercolor class, it might be today we're painting a green jay. For the character design class, it may be, okay, we're going to draw a narwhal in a backpack, and it's going to be making that character design is really making whatever that is into a character. So when you think about Simba, or you think about Kim Possible, or like Charlie Brown, or those characters, is like they have such different styles where their eyes look different, their heads look different, the proportions are different. Charlie Brown's head is like way bigger than his body, whereas Simba looks pretty close to proportionally accurate. But what you do in character design is find out what makes that person or animal what they are, and you're bringing that to life while still exaggerating or distorting some things to make it fun and playful. And so which class you want depends on what you would like to do. And I'm going to have a free parent event, kind of just sharing the opportunities for your artistic kids, because I think there is a big stigma for like oh, my kid's going to grow up to be a starving artist. And honestly, there's just so many opportunities and amazing things out there. So I'm going to be doing that on the 30th, and it's just going to be from my Facebook page. But if you want to get into comic book or animation or something like that, you might want to do the character design. If you want to do something more like what I do, where I work for curriculum companies, or if you want to get into scientific illustration, or if you want to do surface design, which is like my shirt has a pattern on it that somebody had to paint that originally. And so whether that's going to be on a journal or a shirt or a pillow or a curtain, whatever it is, somebody had to come up with that pattern. And so there's tons of work for those kinds of things. So those are the classes I'm going to be having. I'm going to start advertising and enrolling for those from this point until August. And I'm going to be collecting kids for that. So let me know if you're interested.
Okay, and if you guys haven't had a chance to sign up for the printable and a chance to be able to win a month of coaching from Laura, I would highly recommend that you guys go do that, because this sign up is closed after 24 hours. Go ahead and put the link in there again, so you guys can all go ahead and make sure and sign up for that, because Laura is amazing and she would be a fabulous coach for your kids and their future illustration dreams. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today and
thank you very much.
This tutorial.
Thank you.